Anger is probably one of the most misunderstood features of being a human. And it's a bit of a hidden treasure. Because honestly, if you master anger and you really understand how it works fundamentally and how you can regulate it and how you can channel it into taking decisions or negotiating or being more of a loving person, it can really supercharge your work. It can supercharge your energy levels. It can be such a resource for relationships. So let's unpack anger. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the architecture of anger, so how it is meant to function, versus how most of us are subconsciously wired because of childhood, society, the way that schools work, etc. And then I can give you some practical tips about using anger in your day-to-day life and how you can even get out of states of depression or burnout or solving difficult relational problems and things like that. So let's get into it. So at a very fundamental level, we as humans are individual yet social beings. So we constantly have to balance being ourselves and being part of a social structure. So in order for that to work, our nervous system has certain design features that make it so that we can actually function as such a, I would say, multidimensional being, because like being a spiritual, multidimensional soul, energy, stream of consciousness, whatever you call it, connected with this vast unconscious God, creator, universe, whatever you want to call that, at the same time being incarnated in a very limited and a very defined body, and not even a single body, because the physical body is what we can see with our eyes and what we can touch, but we also do have other bodies, like our intellectual body, for example. It has all the same features that a body has, and also an emotional body. And part of the emotional body are very basic, very primal feelings like sadness or fear or anger. So the main reason that we do have anger is because it is mainly a source of information about our boundaries. Our boundaries are what I would say our definition. It is something that makes me, me, and makes you, you. A boundary at a very basic level can be something like the preferences that you have, or things that you intuitively say yes to or say no to. And I'm referring to the emotional body here. We need to differentiate now, because quite often we do have a rational part that is in opposition with our emotions. Because especially if you are not really trained or have not exercised inner alignment a lot, then you can tend to kind of think yes but feel no, or the other way around. For example, I might be part of a social structure where smoking is normal. So rationally, I would maybe not want to smoke because of everything I know about smoking and how it is detrimental to my health. But on some emotional level, I might have a yes to smoking because I'm part of a social group and I kind of want to belong. So the way I talk about boundaries is, I mean, a full body yes or a full body no. or that thing that we call the gut feeling. Like sometimes even for no obvious reason, you just do not want something. And this feeling, that moment when you are like, no, this is actually anger energy. Let me explain. Anger, as every other emotion, does have an intensity, a bit like the volume knob on your radio. So it means that anger can come with full intensity, like 10 out of 10. This is when somebody's in full-on rage and cannot control himself anymore. But then there is the other spectrum where you are like 0.01 anger, and that is that slight nudge, that slight thing that either tells you, no, wait a second. It's that push, when you push something away from you intuitively. It's when you are in a subway and somebody just comes a bit too close, then you automatically go, That is already a beginning of anger energy. How do you know? Because imagine such a situation and imagine that it would escalate. Like somebody comes too close and then you go, and then they come even closer. Then you will get really angry. You'll be like, hey, wait a minute. So that is the intensity adjusting to the situation. Because that is what a healthy emotional body does. It adjusts to the situation and it uses emotions as guides for you to know what you're at. So another example is, because feelings are not always information. Sometimes feelings are also a source of energy. For example, imagine that you are watching TV and you are sitting on the couch and you are just very, very comfortable and relaxed. And then you remember that you need to do the dishes. And part of you maybe does not want to do the dishes, but you know that you want to do the dishes in the end because they need to get done and you do not want to do it tomorrow, so whatever. What happens in that moment when you decide that even though you're comfortable, you're going to stand up and go do it? There is this very short, maybe you did not even notice, but there is that moment of, okay, let's do it. And that is anger energy as well. This might be like 1 out of 10. It's not a lot of anger, but it is still that same energy. It is that movement. It is that push that in this moment you do not give it to somebody else who kind of crosses your boundaries, but you give it to yourself in order to not cross your own boundaries again, because you kind of have an intuitive no to leaving the dishes there and you have an intuitive yes towards something. So the energy of anger can be a yes and a no. It can be energy and it can be information. The problem is that most of us did not grow up in a healthy emotional environment, meaning that our primary caretakers usually are not very emotionally literate. They struggle themselves because of the caretakers that they had. That means that most of us grow up in a situation where probably your first encounters with anger are for sure negatively judged. So you're either going to get angry as a child and you will receive, don't be so angry or stuff like that, or you would watch maybe your father get angry and your mother get very upset, or either one or both of them would usually not handle anger well, which creates an imprint in your system, in your nervous system especially, that works a bit like an association. So it says anger equals danger, usually, because if it's not handled well, it means that it creates conflict, it creates tension, it creates something that leads to unsafety, and unsafety for a child is very, very bad. It means danger. So what we kind of need to do is unwrap all that, because in our natural state, if we do not, I mean, I'm not saying that it happens on purpose, but if we do not sabotage the emotional development of a child, then we all intuitively know how anger works and how to use it. But we get so conditioned first by our caretakers, and then it goes on in school and workplace as well, where, usually you do not get healthy ways of using anger, and you do not really get examples. And as children, we learn a lot by copying. So we usually copy either the exact thing that we see, some sort of dysfunctional usage of anger, or because we kind of feel that it's bad, we try to do the opposite, which is the same thing, just like in another form. It's the same dysfunction, but the opposite expression of it. So, for example, my father used to get angry and then somehow realize that he doesn't want to be angry. And then he would just leave the room, not say anything. And then he would not talk with me for like 2 or 3 days. And then at some point, he would just get back to being normal as if nothing happened. And this is one pattern, and there are different patterns. There are some parents that get really violent when they're angry. There are some that have a lot of issues feeling anger at all because it's so blocked. There's different expressions of that dysfunction, but all of it leads to a child just not knowing how to use that energy that actually comes up very naturally. Now we need to talk about emotional charge and emotional imprints, because this is another massive, big confusion that we have right now as a society. We do not really understand how emotions work, and we get confused so many times. Because as I said, a healthy emotional body adjusts the intensity of emotions to the situation. But now I already hear some of you saying, but there's all these situations where people sometimes get so angry, which is not adjusted to the situation at all. Like sometimes you say the wrong thing and somebody gets triggered and they have all these emotions coming up. So why does this happen? This happens because, especially in childhood, it can also happen later, but especially in childhood, whenever you have a situation where you feel a lot of emotion, as a child, you're not quite grown up yet emotionally, so your capacity to regulate yourself emotionally is not yet fully developed, which means that the emotional charge that you feel cannot go through its natural cycle by itself. So you need your caretakers to co-regulate with you emotionally. What does that mean? For example, when something happens to you as a child, let's say you play with another kid from the neighbors or something, and then he oversteps your boundary. Maybe he punches you in the face. Maybe he takes away your toy or something. Something happens and you get angry. And then there is a certain intensity that builds up in your system. And naturally, it would build up. And when the situation is resolved, when you're able to assert your boundary, for example, then the charge would go away naturally. You can see that in nature. For example, when a deer gets chased by a cheetah. I don't even know if this is a real life situation, but so there's a lot of anger in that system. Like he needs to be fully activated and he needs to be fully focused. So he's running and there's all this emotional charge. And let's say that he can escape. Like there's a river or whatever, I don't know. And what does he do? He does this shaking movement. Like you can see that in nature documentaries. It takes a few seconds to drain all the emotional charge from the nervous system. And then he's chill and he's grazing or doing whatever. So this is a natural way to deal with emotional charge. As humans, we are kind of special mammals because we do not fully ripen inside the womb. We actually still develop after birth, which does not happen with other animals. So our nervous system is still in development even after our birth. So that means that we need our primary caretakers, mother, father, your tribe, ideally, lots of people that can co-regulate with you. So they can sit down with you, they can feel, breathe with you, hug, whatever it is that you need in that moment to calm down again and to release all the stress chemicals from your nervous system. Now, because our parents did not learn how to do that, and they quite often are confronted with their own judgment and their own conditioning towards anger, they do not co-regulate. What happens? This charge turns into an emotional imprint. So it is being stored in your nervous system. This is kind of a design feature of our emotional body to store unresolved emotions for later. Why this works is because the part of our brain that processes emotions does not think linearly. It does not have a concept of time attached to it. And this is why it is so confusing to witness somebody who gets triggered or to be triggered yourself. Because what does be triggered really mean? It does not mean to get angry because of something. It means that the situation reminds you of another thing that happened before at some point in your life. And because that part of the brain that processes emotions cannot really differentiate between something that is happening right here, right now, and something that happened 30 years ago, it brings up that whole charge. And then people around you go like, why are you so angry? Or why are you so sad? Like it works with other emotions as well. So as a society, as humans, we need to remember that this is how we're functioning. There's nothing wrong with this. This is how we are made. This is how we are supposed to be. Because if something was not resolved before, it needs to be resolved at some point. So our nervous system automatically brings it up. So we kind of have to, in that moment, we have to deal with an overlay. So we have one situation where you are angry because you did not get the ice cream flavor that you wanted, but you are also angry because as a child, you did not get the thing that you wanted, and there was nobody to co-regulate your emotional charge. So now you have to deal with both in an overlay, and you have to kind of navigate that situation. So old anger usually turns into other things because this is what our emotional body does. It mixes things. Because usually when you have an unresolved situation, you're not just angry. You might also be sad because you feel helpless. You might also feel fear at the same time because there's nobody to help you to resolve your anger. So these emotional imprints are usually not pure anger, but they can be something like a resentment, or something like even depression, parts of your psyche that feel depressed and frozen. Or it can also be something like defiance, when you feel very defensive and you do not want to talk with anybody about it, which is a form of frustration where you are angry and sad and helpless at the same time. So there is all kinds of variations to that. The other thing that you absolutely need to know about anger is that it is one of those emotions that can be strong enough to block the connection to the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that handles rationality and that also handles self-reflection. So the connection to that brain can be blocked when you're experiencing strong fear or strong anger, which explains why when somebody is really angry, they cannot think rationally. So they cannot weigh the consequences of whatever is happening. And they do not even notice that they cannot judge the consequences because the self-reflection is turned off. So you kind of need to know that there is a certain loss of control, which is a natural thing when you go into high intensities of anger. This is why it is good to kind of have a reference point, kind of have experiences that you kind of know, that you're not taken by surprise when you get angry, but you know how it feels when the intensity rises, that you can act accordingly before you get into those high intensities. There's nothing wrong in being out of control. There is nothing inherently wrong in experiencing high intensities of anger. As humans, we are actually made for that. We are made to feel emotions in the whole spectrum and in all intensities. But as we are, as a society, in this transition phase where we need to relearn how emotions work, this can have, this learning phase is a bit like when you are sorcerer apprentice and you practice some spells and you accidentally make the whole house explode or whatever. So it's a bit like that. While we're doing our baby steps, relearning emotions, it can have consequences. Just be gentle with yourself. So, taking decisions. How can you use anger to take better decisions? One thing is, anger is located in your body, usually, in your lower belly. This is why we are talking about the gut feeling. And this is the place where you can train yourself to be attuned to whatever is going on down there. It is obviously not the same for everybody because people are wired differently. But for a lot of people, this is a way to access anger, to access the clarity that anger brings with it, is by being attuned to your lower belly, to that sacral center in your emotional body. You can even do that when you do grocery shopping and you're not sure what you want to eat. You can take that pineapple and you can kind of tune into what does your body say about it. Does it go, Is there this push? Or is there an openness towards it? Or when you meet somebody and you talk about things and somebody starts complaining, or somebody judges you or judges someone you love, or says something that you think is not appropriate, remember that feeling. How does that feel in your body? Usually it's that sort of contraction or slight tension that you get in your belly. This is like a 0.5 out of 10 anger intensity. So what you can do is train to put your attention there. And the other thing is allow yourself to be angry, because when you have the habit, the subconscious, for whatever reason, habit of being a not angry person, Like there are people that say, I don't have anger issues, I never get angry. It becomes sort of an identity. But those people are usually also the people who are not very strong at making decisions. These are usually, like, if you are somebody who identifies as not an angry person, then probably you just leave the dishes there, or you just go with whatever is presented to you. So people can manipulate you pretty easily. And also, you kind of don't really get what you want in life, because, sometimes when you are in a restaurant and there's this menu and they give you the 10 things and you do not want any of them, you want something else. Somebody who allows themselves to be angry will also have the courage to go and ask and just go like, but can you make me this instead? And quite often they say yes, because why not? And if you have this identity of I'm not an angry person, then you will probably just choose something that is like the least awful, but is that how you want to live your life? So how can you change that identity? There is different contexts, there's different exercises that you can do. One thing which is really cool is rewire what it means to be angry. Most of us automatically on autopilot do not find anger acceptable. We find it either dangerous or kind of ridiculous. This is why when you, for example, stand in front of somebody with like a few meters distance and you look into the eyes of the other person and you express anger, like you say, no, or you say some swear word or whatever, or you shout at them. You express pure anger for something or for no reason, just as an exercise. When you do that for the first time consciously, usually people start giggling, which is an unconscious expression of not taking anger seriously, not taking your own clarity seriously. So you can train that. You can do it again and try not to laugh after that. That is one exercise that you can do. The other thing that you can do is just train yourself to feel anger in your body for no reason and just get this experience that it is okay, that nothing dangerous happens and you will not die and you will not get into trouble just because of that. You can do that by taking a towel in your hands and pulling on it with full strength, or you can go into the forest or go on close to a motorway where it's super loud and you do not disturb anybody and you can shout the hell out of you. Or you can just tighten all your muscles and go and do things like this. Just connect with your sacral, like with your lower belly, and try not to fake it in terms of act, but more like feel that energy, like that primal thing in your belly that goes and connect with that and express that through whatever movement or whatever feels authentic for you in that moment. It might be a bit difficult when you try it for the first time or the first 3 or 5 times, but you will get used to it and you will feel. You will be able to reconnect to that energy. And what might happen when you start doing this is that other emotions can arise in that moment. So you can suddenly, sadness will get triggered, or fear or other feelings, which is very natural because there is probably a reason that you stopped feeling anger at some point. And it's probably long ago and you probably do not consciously remember, but your nervous system remembers. It remembers everything. It will remember that you were afraid in that moment where you were angry and you wanted to express your anger, but it was very dangerous because your parents could not handle it. So you got really anxious and you shut it down. And then 30 years later, you want to relearn anger, and the part of your brain that processes emotions cannot tell which happens now and what happened 30 years later, 30 years ago. So it brings up that emotional charge and those emotional waves. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing to fear about it. You can just feel whatever you feel. You can go through these waves. One thing about emotions is that they always pass. They always change. They are like water. They are never the same. Do not get anxious and think that if you get into sadness, you will never get out of it. You will always get out of it. At some point, every wave goes up and it comes down again, if you let it. Some other amazing things you can do with anger is negotiating. Like when you are finding agreement with somebody, then you can use the connection to your belly again as a signal if something is not right for you. So you can adjust. So you do not enter into agreements that maybe make sense, maybe you think should be okay, but are not really okay for your nervous system for some reason, whatever reason. Don't judge your intuition. It is part of your intuition. It will always be right. And you will always regret if you go against that gut feeling. This is one thing you can do. Another thing is you can actually use anger to create a safe space. So why does anger create safety? Because as tribal creatures, we know that the strongest person in the group will protect the group. Because this is how we are wired. We are social creatures. We naturally take care of each other. And if you see somebody who can handle anger, then you naturally trust that person more. This might not be very intuitive because in our society, we kind of forgot this. We kind of point with our finger at the angry person, going, yeah, they are evil or whatever. Because in Hollywood movies, for some reason, and in comics and in all the stories, the angry people are the evil people. But actually, imagine you are sitting in a park. There's different people. Some are having a picnic, whatever. Then imagine there's a fight happening. So there is some sort of disagreement. What does this create? This creates tension for everybody who's around. We naturally tend to tense up when there is disagreement. Why? Because we are social creatures and every disagreement is a potential danger for the whole group. Our nervous system remembers that. So imagine there is somebody who walks up and says, hey guys, stop, and he kind of handles the situation and creates peace. What does this require? This requires anger, because if you do not trust your anger, if you do not have that activation energy, that decisiveness, that assertive kind of superpower, then you will not resolve a conflict. Then you will either just sit there, hesitate, hope that it will handle by itself, or you might maybe go up there and try to resolve something, but if you're not angry enough, you'll be kind of walked over, so you will not get the authority that you need to resolve a conflict. So imagine there is somebody who is very present, and he goes up there and he's like, hey guys, what's going on here? Let's figure it out, So that assertive person who embodies this like 1 or 2 out of 10, maybe 2 out of 10 anger, depending on how bad the conflict is, maybe it's 3 or 4. He might apply physical strength to pull the 2 guys apart, whatever. And imagine the conflict gets resolved. What happens to all the other people around? They naturally trust that person. And not only because they see that peace is one of his values, but also because they know that he can handle his anger and he can use it positively. So that person just used his anger emotion to create safety, not only for those 2 people, but for the whole group, because the whole group will trust them now. And last but not least, my favorite one, you can use anger, consciously use anger, in order to have much loving relationships with your partner, with your friends, with your boss, whoever. How does this work? Anger, if not resolved in some sort of conflict, if not expressed properly and not followed up with the whole wave, turns into resentment. So how this happens is, imagine you are in your office, you are new there kind of, and the boss walks up to you and he says something that is maybe not so kind, and you feel kind of irritated, and then he walks away, and then you sit there and your nervous system gets activated and you're like, does he not like me? Like, what's going on here? Why is he judging me? Like, naturally, maybe your mind goes like, okay, he's having a bad day or whatever, but your nervous system just feels that boundary violation. It just feels that he did not treat you the way that you want to be treated. So something was not okay. This is the primary messaging of your anger, of your emotional body saying something is not okay for me here. And then imagine you do not follow up on that. So what happens? Your nervous system remembers. Remembered anger is resentment. It is that feeling of, here comes the boss again. He hates me, whatever. He's probably going to say something. Like you start building up these walls, kind of, that turn him into the villain, that turn him into something that is an oppositional force for your well-being. And usually the way we understand this, the way we kind of learn that from, again, Hollywood movies or whatever, is that he's the bad guy here, that he is to blame for you feeling resentful. But actually, the responsibility in that particular situation is on you. Because what you can do is use your anger in order to create clarity and connection. How do you do that? You go to your boss, you knock at the door, and you ask, do you have a minute? I need help, or I need to clarify something. Do you have 5 minutes for me? If he says no, or if he says yes, but you feel that he's like stressed or whatever, does not really have the capacity to listen, don't do it. But if he does, then you can just walk up to him and say, remember that day when, like 2 days ago, when we talked about this and that report, whatever, and you said that thing, he might not even remember. That really hurt me. Like, and you can tell him how you remember what happened, and you can just talk about your own feelings. You do not have to go like, you're asshole or whatever, but just be present with whatever you feel. And chances are he had no idea. Chances are he did have a bad day, or had felt a lot of pressure from somebody else. Maybe somebody else went over his boundaries, and then you just happened to be there in that moment. Or usually, as people, we do not want to overstep each other's boundaries. We do not want that. We do not want to hurt each other. But we often do, just because we do not know. So in this situation, you get the chance to use your anger and be like, okay, I'm going to stand up. It's like the same decision with the dishes. Like, I stand up and go do the dishes, even though I don't want to. Here it is. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to initiate that uncomfortable conversation in order to just create clarity and create completion for these feelings. Because anger does not experience completion if it does not arrive where it needs to arrive. Anger, you cannot process anger on your own, because it always has an address. It has like a direction where it points at, which is usually another person. So if you do not want to turn your anger into resentment, then go and initiate that uncomfortable conversation, and you will realize that even in like 5 minutes, you can resolve the whole thing and forget about it. what will naturally happen is, as soon as you realize that you got heard, that your boss was like, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't notice that. I was angry myself and I whatever was there, and you can create understanding both ways, and then you will realize that you have a moment of a moment where your nervous system realizes that the reason why the anger was there in the first place, as a messenger for your boundaries, that it has served its purpose because you had the conversation now. You said what you needed to say. So in that moment, it lets go of the tension and the stress chemicals get drained from your system. And with a breath or two, your nervous system can relax, and there is no resentment and there is no trauma or ongoing latent kind of conflict created. So this is another wonderful thing how you can use anger. I hope this helped. Let me know if you need any support, learning, relearning, unlearning anger patterns, and take good care.